Board. Today is Tuesday, October 13th. There is a need for an executive session. The executive session will be in the first floor conference room. Governing Board may convene executive session for legal advice with attorney regarding teacher evaluation. That's item 1 on our work study agenda. Is there a motion for executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Jetty. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned to executive session. Actually, not adjourned, but recessed to executive session. Yeah, here we go.
I was going to say, I don't think my high school principal knew my name.
Just have you mute your mic.
Oh, sure.
All right, we can begin the work study session. It is 6 o'clock. It's October the 13th, Tuesday, and this is the Gilbert Governing Board. We welcome those of you who are watching proceedings online through live stream. We welcome all those who are present for the presentation. This evening we have two presentations, and we're calling to order and would like to just state for the record that all board members are present for this work study session. And item number 3 is a presentation discussion of topics. Item 301 is health benchmarks update. And then item 302 is the FY 2020 annual financial report. So I will defer to Dr. McCord for item 3.01.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. Tonight I just wanted to give you an update like we've done at most board meetings since benchmarks have come out. Give me a second while I connect. Okay. Arizona Department of Health Services, health benchmarks. We also have Maricopa County as they pertain to Gilbert Public Schools. I want to make sure you can hear me. For the entire county data, this is what's displayed on their website, and they update that every Thursday. If you'll look in criteria 1, 48 per 100,000, the benchmark is met. If you'll notice again on that one particular benchmark, there's 2 ways to meet that. You only need to meet one of them in order for that benchmark to turn green. That is trending up. The week before was 44 per 100,000. Criteria 2 is percent positivity. That's at 3.8%, trending down. Before it was at 4.1%. As last reported for the week of September 13th. And criteria 3, we've leveled off at 2% for hospital COVID-like visits. And so that is our current health data. That was reported again last Thursday. For Gilbert Public Schools boundary information, this is just a depiction of where you go to their website and you click on our district boundaries after you put in our name in the little search bar there, and this information pops up, gives you the current data as well as prior weeks, and I'll go over that on the next slide. Current week reported on October 8th for the week of September 20th through the 27th. It's 56.66 1 per 100,000 for case rate. And they classify that as moderate risk. Criteria 2 is, and again, that's trending up. And criteria 2, percent positivity, is at 3.66, which is minimal risk. That is trending down. And criteria 3, hospital visits, 2.0%. That's green, that's leveled off, and you can see the current week, which I just reported on, and the prior week right next to it, and those percentages. Just a side-by-side comparison of those same exact numbers related to both sets of benchmarks. Again, no need to re-explain those same numbers. I just wanted you to be able to see that. And then over the past 4 weeks, here's where the numbers look like. Again, you saw last week, or this reported on the 8th, and then again you can see each week prior for the last 4 weeks and where we look like on criteria 1. 4 weeks ago we were at 43, and now we're currently at 48. We dropped to 32, popped back up to 44 the prior week. And in criteria 2, we've hovered around 4.0%, between 3.8% and 4.1%. And then again for hospital visits, criteria 3, we've hovered right around 2%. So wanted to make sure you had that for the county. And then for the school district boundary area, 4 weeks ago, as reported, it was at 33.79, and currently we're at 56.66. And again, that number has gone up and down over the past 4 weeks, and we are currently trending up. Criteria 2, 4 weeks ago, was at 3.33%. And from last week, it was 3.69, or the week before that, it was 3.69, reported on October 1st. And for October 8, it's 3.66 again, and again, it's leveled off at 2% for the last 4 weeks for criteria 3 COVID-like illnesses. Did you want to say something, Mr. Carr?
So Dr. McCord, as I look at this data, what that indicates to me, where the positivity and the cases per 100 are directly related, your number of tests per positive tests is the numerator in both of those numbers. So if our percentage is staying the same, which it pretty much is, what that indicates is that more people are being tested, and that's why your cases per 100 are going up. And if you look at the raw data behind that, that validates that people have, back in August 30, September 5th, we had a lull in testing, and then it subsequently has picked back up. So we need to understand what's behind the numbers, but we will follow these metrics as we've committed to.
I think that's a great point to make there. And so that's a snapshot of the last 4 weeks for our boundaries and the county. And that's it. Just wanted to update you on these.
I have a question, and it has to do, and it was a few weeks ago, where we had somebody sent us a form it had all of the counties in Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
and it had Maricopa as being in yellow.
Correct.
Why? Can you explain it? I know you can't explain it, but you're getting all of our information just directly from the Arizona Department of Health Services,
And the
correct?
Maricopa County
Okay.
website as well. Everything that's reported there. Every once in a while, I think a couple weeks ago, they put up that chart you were referring to where it shows one county in the green. And I think
Yeah,
that was
it's
Greenlee
Greenlee,
County.
yeah.
And I checked on that again today. It looks the same to me. I don't know why necessarily or when they started to put that up. But that definitely wasn't something that was up at the beginning of all this. And so,
No, it was put up the week of, probably about the 14th or 15th. Yeah, because I had
Or
the
September?
previous chart. Yes, I had
Yeah.
the previous chart up. I looked at it one day,
Mhm.
and then when I clicked on it the next day, it had changed. And I still had the tab up on my computer to see
Right.
that they had changed the charts.
And are you finished? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I have a second question. I read somewhere in the paper today that I think it's Pinal County went in and closed a high school.
they did.
Is that a possibility in Maricopa County too when we make, I mean, not us specifically, but it hasn't happened yet to my knowledge in Maricopa County.
I think what happens, and I don't know the specifics about Pinell because I read the same article and I don't think it gave a lot of specifics, and that was in the Florence School District, I believe. I would take direction and recommendations from the county when it comes to that. You know, you'll see they also have a section, and I can't remember which website it's on off the top of my head, but they talk about outbreaks. And I think that's a pretty strong word because it's 2 cases or more, and they have to be related in some aspect. You have, and what's interesting is you have a lot of districts now surrounding us that have put up dashboards that started today, which I think is great. You know, Chandler was the one that started that off, and then we followed behind that, and I think Mesa has one now. Higley just put one out there, and you'll see on like Mesa's dashboard, they have a couple high schools that have 5 active cases, but they're not shut down. I think what we're required to do is put information out to families and staff and students that say this is considered an outbreak based on the criteria from Maricopa County. I think shutting down a school is either it's directed by the county, depending on how many students or staff have COVID on that campus that are active. But I also think that as a school district, we have the ability to do that as well if we need be. So I don't know the specifics behind Pinell County. Other questions about that? All right.
Well, I do appreciate that we're keeping careful track. I think
We
that's
are,
important.
we update the dashboard every Wednesday, and again, just as a reminder to everybody, that cases are, they go on and then they drop off, depending on the timing of when symptoms were started, depends on when it was reported. And Jennifer Frost, our Director of Health Services, does a nice job keeping all of that straight and reporting everything to Maricopa County and taking guidance from them related to anything that we need to do as a school district. And so, again, we will update that again tomorrow. And you hear a lot sometimes from campuses, oh, we hear this kid has it or that staff member has it, but we don't go by rumors, we go by confirmation. And so I think that's real important. And we're a school district and we have, 33,000 kids and 4,500 employees. Of course, people are going to make some assumptions about different things, but we make sure that everything that's currently active is put on that dashboard, because we don't want to mislead anybody related to that. So,
Dr. McCord, how often are we communicating with our families as it relates to the home protocols and testing prior to coming to school?
We put information
all of those things.
in our weekly newsletter. We try to emphasize, all of those protocols, places where they can go to look them up and read through them and see videos related to that. And so I think there's a constant reminder out there that Don does a really nice job when it comes to our weekly newsletter.
And we're basically working off an honor system there that the information is coming to us
We are.
accurately and honestly. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
You bet.
And thank you, Don, for the continued communication with our families.
I have one more question. When we do report something to the county, do they send somebody for every report?
They
or
don't
no?
necessarily send somebody. That individual, whoever's in charge of there's usually like a team. And so they will investigate it, whether that's they'll make contact, usually it's by phone, to families. And we'll give them information, like if there's somebody that is ill at a high school, we'll get seating charts for each of their classes on their schedule and determine, based on where they're sitting, who might have been exposed. And again, a lot of that comes from interviews as well from the county.
Dr. McCord, in determining when a name comes off of that list, or not names, but the numbers change, how do we determine how much time goes by? Who set that standard?
County Health Department.
So
It's 10 days from the time you're symptomatic that the symptoms are reported. And for those that have to quarantine, it's 14 days. And so it's different.
But they're not going to be in that number because they've just been exposed. Unless they then
Right.
develop it, they won't be in that number.
Any active COVID cases, no exposures or quarantines are related to that number.
And I just, and the answer, I just wanted to make sure people understood that we are following a county standard. That's not,
That is correct.
that's
That's
not a
something
determination we've made on our own.
we woke up and decided one day and I think that's good, because we're an education system, not a healthcare system, and so getting that guidance is important to us, and being able to rely on that. So it's been good. It's been very helpful.
I know some of our neighboring states have followed that exact same number, 10 days from exposure, 14. I read that just earlier this week that one of our neighboring states has changed that for quarantine students, and it's now, I think it's now they can come back with a negative test.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 3 days or 4 days, I can't remember what the article said, and a negative test from exposure. Do you know if our county's considering that?
Well, we've asked them to consider something like that, just because we do hear from families, and it is difficult, that have to quarantine. I guarantee, I know it's for a safety reason, but it's also hard to understand that the person that actually has the virus is only 10, and 14 for those that were possibly exposed. And so I haven't got anything else back from Jen related to that. I know she posed the question, but I haven't heard back yet.
This may be a segue of some sort to our next topic, but I'm just curious if we've seen, since we're just back from a break, any increase in enrollment that would have a positive effect on our finances as we move down the road here. Have we seen any trend upward there?
So I would love to tell you the right answer to that right now, but I want to give it a few more days just because of when individuals at schools put information into the system. I know that several students dropped off of Global, went back to the campus. I saw a number of like 240 over break left Global. And then today when I looked at our system, it looked like we had a jump of about 370. So I get excited at first, but at the same time, I'm like, we got to let this level out for the week. It's kind of like at the beginning of the year, our numbers are all over the place. And that's kind of what I want to have happen now. Is that a good answer, Ms. Betts?
I don't want to be premature, but I'm hopeful that that phenomenon will occur.
Yeah.
So I will move to the next topic if there are no
Dr.
other
Sanders,
questions.
can I just correct something? I just quickly looked up. The neighboring state I quoted has moved it to a 7-day quarantine to reduce it from 14 to 7.
You said
so
17. I was like, I
no,
don't think
sorry,
that's good news.
7-day quarantine with a negative test. But since I threw that out there, I wanted to be accurate to the public.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any other questions for Dr. McCord related to COVID data? No, we'll move then to item 3.02, the FY 2020 Annual Financial Report. Dr. McCord?
I will turn this over. This is our annual report for our finances. I'll turn it over to Ms. Betts, who I believe is going to turn it over again.
So good evening, Dr. Santa Cruz, board members. First, I wanted to introduce the finance team that really gets into the details of both the annual financial report as well as all the budgets that are presented to you on a regular basis. So first, I wanted to introduce Ms. Jackie Mattinen. She's the Director of Finance, and she's right behind me. She will be presenting to you this evening, as well as Pat Donahue. She's the Internal Auditor. And Ashley Miranda, she's just been promoted to our budget coordinator. So the four of us have been actively working over the last couple of weeks to make sure that we have all the information correct on this very important report. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and step back and hand the mic over to Ms. Mattinen.
Welcome, Ms. Mattinen.
Thank you. Goodness. Good evening, Dr. McCord, Dr. Santa Cruz, members of the governing board. As Ms. Betts stated, I am here to present the FY 2020 annual financial report. Before I get started, I would like to take a moment to recognize Pat Donahue and Ashley Miranda. They worked tirelessly for weeks on this. Although it is only 9 or 10 pages, it took a tremendous amount of work to put this data together. So thank you, ladies. I'm glad that you are on my team, or I'm on your team. We're on the same team. So this report is unaudited. Our final audited results will be presented with the CAFR in December. This report consistently shows the budgets and expenditures that have been approved throughout 2020. I need my notes so I don't forget anything. Today's report includes AFR items to note. We'll talk a little bit about teachers' salaries, revenues and expenditures, specific fund details, a slide about tax rate history, and then appendix. So overall, there was an increase to M&O and unrestricted capital spend. As you know, we approved compensation increases, and there were increases to the benefits rates. Also increased allocations to athletics and schools capital. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or ESSER, we have been approved for $2.3 million. There has been no expense to date from that grant. And the Enrollment Stabilization Grant, we did receive approval late last week, but we don't know the amount yet. We will find that out in mid-November. Because of these awards, we will expect an AFR revision. We have a phone call with the auditors to find out a timeline, but we're hoping possibly December. We budgeted $11 million for a budget balance carry forward into '21. We do anticipate that that will be slightly higher after ADE's final reports come out. And then the appendix at the end details significant year-over-year variances in expenditures related to the AFR. So average teacher salary, this is on page 7, table H. This slide was taken also from the fiscal '20 budget and is also on our website. So you have seen this before. There's, sorry about this, I should have mentioned this. We put in another slide. We wanted to share this slide again. You have seen this when we did the proposed and adopted budget in the summer. This is the actual salary of 3 specific teachers from the base year of 2018 through fiscal '21. These are teachers who have been here throughout that time period, and the overall commitment from GPS has been 18.5, and as you can see, the average is 18.69.
And
Oh, I
Ms.
just-
Mattson, that
Yes.
differences from the 12.2 because you have a mix of teachers. You have experienced teachers who have left with higher salaries that are then replaced with brand-new teachers, a lot of first-year teachers that have lower salaries.
That is correct, yes. Mhm.
I was going to say, it would, in thinking about the way the state has asked us to do this, it makes sense if you have everybody stays the same, but because people change, it really is just an indication of the people who are currently here compared to last year, but it's not a certain teacher having received that salary increase. It's just an indication.
That is correct, thank you. And it really depends on when we pull the data, and it could change by, if we pulled it in October or pulled it in January, we would probably have a different average salary.
I also wanted to point out the 12.2% on this report only goes through fiscal year 2020.
2020, correct.
And so that also includes 2021 as well. So that's another reason there's such a big difference between 12.2% and 18.5%, because that includes the what we approved going forward.
Into
But
21.
But this is looking backwards.
Exactly, yes, yes. So this slide that's up on the screen now for fiscal '21 includes the $200 on the base plus 5%. Yep. So the ending fund balance, this is on page 1 of the AFR. We felt this was important to share. The ending fund balance in M&O shows $31.2 million. That is a combination of budget balance carry forward and excess cash. Although the excess cash comes in handy because we don't have to borrow money at the beginning of the year, we are not allowed to use that to increase our budget capacity. We do have authority to spend the unrestricted capital outlay and the bond building, however. I wanted to touch on adjacent ways. We received some back taxes in '20, and the county charged us for negative interest, so we have fixed that moving forward. So the ending fund balance is 0. Also, a note on the bond building, the ending fund balance was $19.7 million. About $10 million of that was encumbered for summer projects. So when we closed those purchase orders, the projects weren't done. When we closed the purchase orders at the end of '20, we immediately re-encumbered those funds. So although it says 19.7 because that's the snapshot in time, about 10 million was immediately re-encumbered to finish out those summer projects.
Miss Mattson, can you explain how we have excess cash that we can't spend, but that we have reflected here in this?
Yes. So we earn interest on M&O that we can't spend. We can't increase our budget capacity. That is several $100,000 a year. Some of it is also comprised of back taxes. Any other questions on that slide? It accumulates over time. This one is the M&O and unrestricted capital.
So let's go back to that. So at some point, if we're sitting on cash that can't increase the budget, is that eventually then get put into the equalization formula or as a credit to our taxpayers for reduced taxes? How, I mean, at some point, if you went on indefinitely, this could accumulate millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
If there's not a way to use it. So how do we eventually use that?
We could offset the taxes for the community. We could do that. We could, although we're not sitting on enough necessarily to do that. The excess cash that we do have works to our benefit so that we don't have to borrow against a line of credit at this point. But that is something to consider in the future.
So right now, it prevents us from having to do the tax advance.
Correct.
Or borrow from a line of credit or other means. So it does currently benefit the taxpayer because we don't have to pay interest on those borrowings
That's correct.
because of that cash. But eventually, if it accumulates beyond what we would need for that type of reserve, we would then treat it as an offset to the tax rate.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Just a one-time,
One time.
but it also, we can use it to, we do gain interest on it, so it's not necessarily a negative at that point, but until we get to the point when it does make sense to give that one-time benefit back to the taxpayer.
That is correct, yes. And we can't spend the interest, and we can't
Right.
use it for budget capacity, right?
Okay.
So it affects our cash flow, it does not affect our income.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Thank you. So this is our M&O and unrestricted capital revenues by source, year-over-year comparison. So on this one, you'll see that the state increased and the local revenue decreased. This is because of the decrease in the local tax rate. This slide shows the M&O and unrestricted capital expense comparison year-over-year. There was a significant increase to spend to capital, and I'll go over some details in the next slide. And salaries and benefits increased overall. And I know we're talking about fiscal 20 and 21, and we're, in so many different fiscal years, so it's important to note that the salary increases that are represented in this slide were approved in the spring of 2019, so almost a year and a half ago. So I think that's just important to note. Unrestricted capitals, details by category. You'll see a large percentage increase in transportation of 4,000%. That is due to our routing software purchase. And also, we've not asked the community to approve bond spend for our district offices. So we do use unrestricted capital for any renovations here at the district office. So you'll see that under facilities acquisition and construction. A portion of the expenses on that line were to remodel the transportation building. The remainder of those expenditures occurred at the school sites.
And we did that because we closed down the power base and to be able
Correct.
to accommodate those drivers coming over to have a more centralized location in order to help the production and the overseeing of the entire department.
That's correct, yes.
The hope of that decision, as I recall it, was that we would expend funds one time for annual savings moving forward. So the idea there is that it will hopefully pay itself back if plans are executed properly.
Right.
Ms. Mountain, can you give me an example of what kind of school maintenance or repair is included in that fund 4,000, the facilities acquisition and construction?
Maybe not specific
Yeah.
examples, but they would be repair to the schools or a classroom renovation that wouldn't be bondable. So as much as possible, we try to use the bond dollars for that. When we can't, if it isn't something that is a true building improvement, then we'll use unrestricted capital.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Matt, can you speak to operation and maintenance of plant and the 144.0?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that, please?
The 2,600. You
Okay.
have a 144.0%.
Increase over prior year. That, I don't remember the specifics.
Partially the equipment we went through,
So what we decided to do last year was push all of the equipment purchases district-wide
Okay.
into the operations department so that the equipment could be deployed where it's needed most when it's needed, so we don't have the same equipment at each individual school site. So
Custodial.
that's the total, the main portion of that change.
Okay.
That would be
Yeah,
cus-
just
custodial
curious.
equipment.
Custodial equipment, yes. Custodial and grounds.
Well, and the reason we're seeing some increases in this from the prior year is because we were given an increase
Correct, there would be an increase
from the
overall.
state
Mhm.
in
District
the
additional.
district additional
That is
assistance.
correct,
So
yeah.
we would expect to see the spend
Mhm.
increase.
Yep. 76%, which is pretty
Yeah.
significant.
Mhm.
Well, we finally had an opportunity to take advantage of capital expenditures that we hadn't had for many years prior.
Right.
And so that's why this chart looks so interesting.
well, and it's money given to us by the state that we don't have to sell bonds and.
Right.
and
Correct.
Use our local taxpayer funds.
That is correct,
to pay
yes.
for, so. I'm sorry. What I was saying was, it's allows us to use the state money given to us to repair buildings and do maintenance rather than use our bond funds, and that way it's less cost to our local taxpayer.
That's correct.
It's been a long time getting the district additional assistance back. It's still not fully restored from 2008, but it's getting there.
Mhm.
Where, with this year, where does that represent the funding, the state funding as a percent of the state formula? Are we back at 50%?
No, it's like 80% or something like that.
I thought we came up to 80% this fiscal year, but but is that this year or was that last year? Okay, and this report's for last year, though.
That's the last year.
So last year, we would have been under that. I'm trying to remember how much they were.
60? It was
60,
60
okay.
in 20.
So what we're hearing is we should expect similar increases this year because, again, we're getting more funds that are supposed to be spent on capital.
Moving on to federal grants, this is an interesting chart. It shows that our beginning fund balance is negative in many of these funds, and our ending fund balance is negative in many of these funds. These are our federal grants, and they are on a reimbursement basis. So the last time that we could request reimbursement was in June. We continued to pay employees and pay bills through August. Our completion reports were due the end of September, so we'll receive the revenue then when those are approved in October, November. On page 6 of the AFR.
So is this where we use some of that cash that we were sitting on that we discussed
Yes,
earlier?
exactly right, yes. On page 6, there was a negative balance in English language learner. That's Fund 071. I apologize, it wasn't highlighted. That is also a state grant, and it is based on reimbursements as well. It just didn't fall into this chart, so we will, the completion report has been submitted, and we will receive the revenue to make that whole as well. Other cash funds, these are cash funds, revenue-driven. Food services is on this chart, but food service has its own AFR. But the rest of these are civic center, community school. They show a decrease in revenue because of the school closure. Programs were canceled, field trips were canceled. It is important to note, though, that community education and food service continue to pay employees from their funds. So with all that, it's not nearly as bad, I suppose, as you would think. We did also refund out of some of these funds upon request, upon parents' request. This slide you have seen before as well. We wanted to include this to show the continued downward trend of our tax rate. And this includes 21. That is it for the presentation. Do you have any questions? Or any questions on the appendix?
Ms. Matt and I thank you and Ms. Betts and all of the finance. The actual forms, the spreadsheets of this are some of the more complicated presentation of these numbers that I've seen in any finance realm. As those schedules tie together and you try to figure out how they tie together, it's like trying to interpret your daily finances using a tax return. It just doesn't work. But we understand that the intent is a report, not to present the finances, so we live with that. But you guys have, you've done a fantastic job of putting this presentation together to highlight the major issues and address those up front. I also appreciate that you got this out to the board early so that we could look through it and resolve many of our other questions. So I thank the entire staff for all of your work on this.
Ms. Matten and Ms. Betts and the team, I echo that sentiment as well, and particularly pleased with the appendix piece. Not that the other part of it wasn't exceptional, but the appendix answered a lot of questions, and I appreciate seeing how we reconcile using those appendices. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
And I'd also like to say, I think that for the last 3 years or so, this has been an ongoing, at every meeting, we're kept up to date. So even though we didn't spend 40 minutes on this tonight, we've spent a lot of time up until now because of the diligence that you've done at every board meeting and keeping us informed. And I think, Mr. Carr, you should take a lot of credit for that, because I know that's been something that you've been passionate about. But, you know, school finance is like 15 foreign languages that you're trying to get together all at the same time. So it's really very much appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
2 questions. I just wanted to know, and I want to thank you guys also. Thank you for this and for all of your work. I just wanted to ask, where are we with our cash reconciliations and different things like that as we're approaching our audit, which is starting right now? And then second of all, I wanted to know what should we expect now? This by law has to be turned in by October 15th, but we can revise it and we expect to revise it. So when do you expect to revise it, and what do you expect next? I guess, so those 2 questions.
Okay. First, I'll speak to the cash reconciliation. We are
Okay.
completely current. We are currently reconciling all of our bank accounts to our GL, to our bank accounts at Wells Fargo on a monthly basis. So,
Thank you.
yep, huge kudos to Ashley Miranda for getting that up and running.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're very, very happy about that. The AFR, Ms. Betts and I were talking about that yesterday. As a matter of fact, we have quite a bit of work to do before the end of the calendar year. So as far as a timeline, we do have a call scheduled with our auditor to talk about the revised AFR. We may have to do a budget revision in December. We've got the CAFR that's due the end of December. So there's a lot of pieces that need to fall together, and they are all connected. So including the ESG and the ESSER funds. So I don't necessarily have a hard and fast answer for you, but we know that we will be doing a revised AFR.
Okay. And you'll just keep us updated as these different funds, as we find out how much we're awarded from those grants, and as we keep going, just like you always have, just the monthly reports,
Absolutely.
and when we should expect those other revisions. Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to point out that we do spend a lot of time making sure that the money is well spent, and we appreciate your time and effort in doing that.
Thank you.
It's really, really important.
Thank you.
Ms. Matten and Ms. Betts, are you going to need signatures from the board this evening?
Yes.
I just don't want you to get away without signing the appropriate document, okay?
Yes. Thank you for asking.
And Dr. Santa Cruz, can I just add one thing to what Ms. Wood said? She asked about the audit, which is not necessarily part of this presentation, but just want to highlight that from the time that this board came together almost 4 years ago, we've had that reconciliation that we inherited. It was a continuous, each year has been a finding on our audit. Clarify for the public, when we say it was a finding, it was a risk finding, not a misspend finding. So there weren't misspends, but it was what we call a controls issue, and could potentially open us up to not being able to find a misspend in a timely manner and control it. So want to clarify what that finding was, but if everything goes according to plan, this will be the first time in, I think, it's 6 years, if I'm remembering right.
Yep.
So we won't get that audit report until February, March-ish, but it will be the first time in 6 years that we have not had that specific finding as a controls issue on the audit. So I'm just very grateful to staff, this current staff who came in and started to address it and almost had it addressed last year, and then this year we will finally have it addressed and have it removed. So thank you for your work and for taking that seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr, for pointing that out. Anything else, Dr. McCord, Ms. Betts, Ms. Matten?
Nope, just want to echo everything you guys said about this team. They work extremely hard and care deeply about what they do, and I think it's reflected in the work that they put out. So, thank you.
All right. We have gone through item 3.01, 3.02 of presentation. We're at item 4, which brings us to the adjournment of this work study session. So if there are no questions, we will adjourn the work study and move to our brief business meeting. And I'll call the brief business meeting to order. That's item 5. And Ms. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Miss Laurie Wood,
Here.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Here?
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz,
Here?
Miss Sheila Ugeti,
Here.
Miss Jill Humphreys.
Here.
Mr. President, all board members are present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And Dr. McCord has been very diligent, very kind to point out information to us via electronic communication where appropriate. And I'd like to just take a minute or so to acknowledge the passing of 2 people from our GPS family. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Roy Haug, who is in transportation, who recently passed, and would like to acknowledge young Sean Jimenez, a student from Mesquite High School, who also recently passed. Our condolences to the families of both of those individuals, and we wish them all well. We move to item 6, which is the consent agenda items, and I am open for a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Ugeti. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. It's been moved and seconded that we accept items as printed for the consent agenda items. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will move to a vote. All those in favor of approval of consent agenda items, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion carries 5-0. We move to item number 7, which is action item 7.01, acceptance of the 2019-20 or the 2019-2020 annual financial AFR. Dr. McCord, anything by way of,
This is just something that we are required to do per statute ARS 15-904 is to submit this annual financial report by October 15th.
and we will meet that deadline. We will entertain a motion.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I move that we accept the 2019-20 annual financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ujeti. It's been moved and seconded to accept item 7.01. Is there any discussion? For those who are viewing, that is the acceptance of the report that we just went through and the items contained therein. Seeing no discussion, we will vote. All those in favor of item 7.01, acceptance of the 2019-2020 annual financial report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carries. We move to item 8 is adjournment of the brief board business meeting. Item 8.01, we are open for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will vote for adjournment. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, those viewing and those here present. We are